All right, we are on air. It's Thursday, which means it's Backdrop Day. So we're here to have a little meeting to update everyone on where we are with Backdrop. We're working on Backdrop CSS, Backdrop CMS, so many letters, which is a content management system specifically for nonprofits, small to medium-sized businesses, and people who are concerned about the cost of moving a Drupal 8 system to Drupal 7 system into Drupal 8. So we're going to try and create an affordable alternative. Um, Hopefully it'll have comparable features to Drupal 8. So we're creating things like CMI and putting views in core, and we'll talk about these a little bit more later. And we're hopefully trying to add new features going forward. So we're going to release 1.0, and then we're going to add new features slowly into the future, which will be great, so that we'll be able to create a system that is really comparable to Drupal 8 in the long run. And while we're working on these changes right now, we're also going to be fixing bugs. So anything that exists in Drupal 7, anything that exists in Drupal 8, anything else that we find that maybe isn't particular to either one of those, if we can squash it and fix it along the way, that would be great. We're also going to be trying to simplify existing systems. So when we can find something that doesn't require changing the APIs too much, and we can remove it, reduce it, or make it make a little bit more sense, we'd like to do that as well, because we realize that Drupal 7 is already expensive, difficult platform for some people to work on, and we'd like to help improve the lives of those people while we're doing it. But the biggest thing for Backdrop is not to change too much. So we're going to try to keep APIs as close to Drupal 7 as possible and still achieve all of the same things that Drupal 8 is achieving, and that'll help make it easy to move from Drupal 7 to Backdrop and similar. Our timeline, we are hoping to release Backdrop 1.0.0 this fall, which is really soon, which is kind of exciting and kind of terrifying all at the same time. And further releases on an ongoing basis. So we're currently thinking about doing them quarterly, and that will include, like, okay, well, whatever we don't get into 1.0.0, we'll put into 1.1. We'll decide what that is. We'll work on it, and when 1.1 comes out, it'll contain that feature. If that feature doesn't get done, it'll get pushed to 1.2, but 1.1 will still come out. So the idea is that we're going to schedule these things regularly so that people can work around them, and if whatever we're working on isn't done in time, that doesn't matter. We'll release anyway. We'll include all of the bug fixes or whatever other features have gotten in that first iteration and move forward. So we've got a bunch of stuff we're working on right now. We've got a handful of things that we're calling major projects that are sort of API blockers that are preventing us from releasing. And then we've got a bunch of other stuff that is important, but maybe not a blocker, things that we'd like to do, but if we don't get done in time, we'll release anyway. And then we have a bunch of minor projects that are just going to make this software much better. So we'll start with the major projects here. The first thing, we've got big news on this, is our blocks and layouts initiative. This is a replacement for the block system in Drupal 7 and our layouts that were dictated by our themes that did a one layout per site, which of course is not realistic for the actual websites we're building these days, and people had come up with a gazillion different kinds of workarounds for how to solve this problem in Drupal. And so we've taken one of these solutions and put it in core. We're calling this our blocks and layouts feature. And Nate, do you want to give us an update on the status of blocks and layouts? You're still muted, I think.
It's hard to give news when I can't speak. Yeah, so the big news from this week is that layout module, the branch has been merged. Yay! Yeah, so we now have our new layout system is now officially in Backdrop Core, which is fantastic. It's a really pretty sweet system. It's not that different from the demo that we gave a couple of weeks ago. If you watch our YouTube channel, there's a layouts preview in there. And it's really just about the same as what you see in that video. The past couple of weeks we've just been fixing bugs, making sure everything works correctly, and making a few enhancements here and there. But for the most part, it's really the same thing. So we've now got layouts in core, which is really exciting. But there's a whole slew of follow-up issues, as you might expect, for something like this that adds a whole bunch of functionality. So issue 345 is our follow-up task. Or follow-up meta issue, and with things to do there like adding token support, adding custom text blocks, adding field blocks, all kinds of additional contexts or additional filters. Like there's a whole bunch of things that can be done. But right now, we basically just have the block or the layout base system in place, and it just wraps around all of the existing blocks. There's nothing really new as far as the blocks that you're able to place, but the underlying framework is now just a lot more powerful. So we're going to continue rolling along with blocks and layouts as much as possible, but at this point we've got it, barring any major bugs, in a shippable position. So, which is great. That means that we'll probably shift some of our resources to other things that are release blockers, like finishing the CMI conversions. That's probably the most critical thing remaining now that we've got layouts in. So layouts rolling along. Anybody reviewing those, reviewing it would be greatly appreciated. It's now in the master branch, or the 1.x branch, so if you pull it down, it'll be there.
And we do have, in the meta issues, there's a bunch of feedback already that can be addressed. So if you're reviewing it and you start creating a list of things that you don't like or things you want changed, make sure to compare to that meta list of issues for changes, because there's a lot of stuff that we already know about that obviously needs to get done, that we can fix things later. So some of those stacks are also novice. So if we have someone who wants to come and reorganize our HTML, that's definitely something we could use help with. So feel free to give it a try and see what you think, and jump in if you feel like you can handle some of those changes.
Okay.
So that's great. That's super exciting. We've been working on that for months and months, and so getting it finally in is huge. I think it's going to be a huge improvement over the way that Drupal 7 handles things. It obviously needs a little polish, but it's solid. So I'm super excited to start playing with it. Next up, other things that are blocking our release. This is what we are shifting our attention to right now, is the configuration management tool. So this is something that we've created in Backdrop, much like they've done in Drupal. It allows you to save your configuration in 2 files rather than storing it in the database. And we've been working on this for a while. We've gotten a bunch of systems converted, but we don't have all of the super important ones converted already, particularly content types and fields. And so I know Nate has also been doing a bunch of work on that lately. Do you want to give us an update on the CMI stuff?
Yeah. So there's still the meta issue 169, that lists the status of everything, of all of the general subsystems. Some of the major ones have been done for a long time. Things like views and variables have been completely converted. Let's see, the new layout system, of course, obviously is using config files to store all of its functionality. And a nice thing is that the layout branch actually fixed a whole bunch of things because variables used to be used for all of the block settings. So there was only one time you could place a block on the entire site. So things like, the number of recent users to show or something like that used to be a global setting stored in the variables table. And with the new layout system, now all of the per block settings are saved along with the layout. So that got rid of a huge number of variables, which was great cleanup. The most important pieces that we're missing right now is content types and fields. But I started on content types a couple weeks ago in issue 171. And it looks really pretty good. I actually think that it's ready to go. It's just that we wanted to get layouts in first because there was a bunch of conflicting update hooks. So now that layouts are in, we can resolve all the conflicts that we had between node types and blocks, and then get node types in. I think with most of these things, like node types, it only took like a couple days to get it converted. The next big thing will be fields, and I'm hoping that it will go along quickly as well. It'll be more complicated than just about anything else. So yeah, node types are going to be done here in the next probably week. And then we're going to move on to fields, and then from then on, the rest of the major subsystems listed in issue 169.
That's great. One of the other major issues we're working on is getting views in core. We have the views module in core right now, but there's a bunch of listings in core that are generated by things that are not using views, and we're working on getting those converted too. And we've had a lot of help in the last few weeks with people building views for us and helping get those ready, which is great. We've got some pull requests which look like they probably need a review, and I'll try and look at those today too.
Yeah,
So views is going.
I was going to say what we're missing on those views issues, and apparently some of our reviewers watch these videos after the fact, but I'll reiterate. What they're missing is that they're missing upgrade paths right now that previously, these settings were put into blocks or for individual pages. And if you're upgrading from a Drupal 7 site, we need to be generating those views during the upgrade path, which basically means making a new update hook and then assembling a giant array that represents the view configuration and then saving it into the active config directory. In some of our early attempts at upgrades, we did stuff like we just took the entire config file out of the default config directory for a module and just threw it right into the active directory. But we realized that that was going to cause upgrade problems in the future if we end up changing the default that ships with, like, let's say default views that ship with user module. If we change them later, then we'll also have later update hooks that expect the default view from when user module was initially installed, like at 1.0. So we can't just copy the active config or the default config files into the active config. We need to essentially rebuild the entire config as a giant array and then just save it into the active config directory as part of an update hook. So it's a little tedious, but it's not actually that much. It's not actually that difficult to do, and that's what we're missing on most of those views conversions. They're already converted. They already work, but they don't automatically create themselves if you're upgrading from a Drupal 7 site. So that's what we're missing.
So there's just a little JSON encode action before, and then it writes to a file.
Right. Yeah. And what that really means is that you would say like config, and then choose the name of the file, like views.view I don't know, user admin or whatever, and that opens up a config file for writing, and then you say config arrow set data, and then you pass in the entire array, and then you just say arrow save. So.
Okay. So you can just use the config API. You don't have to do any of that yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
You definitely you just assemble the giant array, and then you use config and then save it.
Okay. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of other places where we're doing this. Like the new update hook kind of gives you a kind of good idea of how to do that. The node type conversion is going to do a lot of that as well because it's the same sort of thing. And then all of the variables we have converted all do this as well. That they all just open up a config file, write a whole bunch of times, and then save.
Okay. So other things we're working on, other than our release blockers, are making sure that we are keeping up with what's going on in Drupal. And there's a couple of places where that's really super important. The first one is security issues. So any security fix that has gone into Drupal 7, we need to make sure we have a comparable fix for Backdrop. So last week, everyone's probably aware of this horrible security problem that came out in Drupal, and everyone has been frantically updating all of their Drupal sites to avoid getting hacked. We need to get that same solution into Backdrop as well, and that's super important for anyone who's running a live Backdrop site, which I think that's one of me. But anyone else should keep. We need to make sure we get those security updates from Drupal into Backdrop as well. There's also a couple of others that haven't been fixed yet previously that were slightly less serious. Those are really important for us to get in before we release. And then the other thing is we have backports from Drupal 8. We've kind of narrowed down all of the patches that they've been working on to specific areas where we want to include focus, and we're looking at the patches that were applied, trying to apply them to Backdrop, and then usually it requires a little reworking to get them to actually apply. And we've got a couple of areas where we would like to include everything they've done, in particular the HTML5 stuff. We want to make sure that Backdrop has all of the fancy new features that Drupal 8 has. And I think there's only 3 issues there that need a little bit more work. One of them is blocked on CSS issue I need to look into. I think that might have actually gotten done, so it's unblocked now, but I'll double check. And then there's 2 other things that have been introduced into Drupal 8 and then caused some serious problems, either in terms of accessibility or introducing bugs. And so we're waiting to commit those to see if those problems can get resolved in Drupal 8 first. So I think what we're going to end up doing is when we need to release, what we'll do is we'll mark this meta issue as closed and create a follow-up with the stuff that doesn't actually get in. So that way we can still say, oh, if we need to add HTML5 required property later, we can do that. But that way that we don't have to keep looking at this same issue. We can create another one where we're specifically focusing on that and try and get it done. And then we've got some other things that we're working on that are important for Backdrop, but not release blockers. The first one is to separate Backdrop's identity from that of Drupal. When you log into a Backdrop website as a user, it should feel different than logging into a Drupal site. And that's hard to do because it's almost the same as Drupal 7. But what we thought would make a really big difference is to update the style guide for the admin interface. So the 7 theme, what's currently called the 7 theme, still looks and feels the same as it does in Drupal. They've done a bunch of stuff in Drupal 8 to kind of bring it a little bit more modern, and we want to do the same. We want to solve the same kind of problems that they've solved, but we obviously don't want to use their patches because then Backdrop will still continue to feel just like Drupal. So we've had Julia doing some work on creating a style guide for us for the last few weeks, but I'm not entirely sure she's got the time to really commit to get that done for us in time for the release. So I would like to follow up with her sometime this week and see if we can get that handed off to maybe someone else who can get us a style guide. And this is not something that requires any skill. So if we have anyone who's watching this video, it doesn't require any coding skill. What we need is someone who has artistic sensibility to create like a picture of what it should look like. We need to know what the heading should look like. We need to know what the font should look like. And we can, create tasks for developers to fix it once we know what it looks like. But without that vision, like that artistic goal of what it's supposed to look and feel like to start with, we're kind of dead in the water. So what was great about Julia is that she had both of those skills. She had the design skill and the code skill, and so we kind of gave her everything, but I think that might have been too much work to dump on one person who doesn't have very much time. So if we have anyone watching this video who has that design aesthetic, which we are lacking, it would really be great to have someone come and contribute at least that much, and then we can take over the code and implement that stuff later. Or if you have both sets of skills, that's even better. But I think that Julia's going to need some help there. So if we could get someone else on that, that would be super useful. And then other stuff we're doing is minor cleanups to the theme system. So making sure that people who are theming for Drupal 7 are slightly less frustrated when they are theming for Backdrop. There's some things that we have done in Drupal 8 to improve the theme layer that don't have anything to do with changing all the files to Twig. I've got a list of those changes. I'd like to make some of those same changes to Backdrop. These, again, are not super critical to get in before we release. It's more important that it is really similar to Drupal 7. So we'll take the ones that are the most annoying and change those. Things that might get us performance improvements and change those. But we're not going to be changing everything. And then other things are user experience improvements. So for people who are using the software, Drupal can sometimes be a frustrating experience. We want Backdrop to be a slightly less frustrating experience, and we're doing a couple of things already to make that better, but we want to do more. And just in the past few days, we've gotten some contribution in India who are super interested in helping us create branding guidelines and user interface guidelines. And this is something that, Apple products are really amazing to use. Maybe we don't believe in their licensing rules, but you can't deny that the products are intuitive and they're friendly and they're fun and you can use them very easily. And they have a really solid example of a user interface guideline, which helps people follow the rules about how to make something that's intuitive and usable. And so what we're going to try and do is establish something similar for Backdrop that's like, hey, if you're building a user interface, these are the rules that you need to follow. And I think that if we can draft and create that, see what's going on in core and where it doesn't adhere to those guidelines and fix it, and then post that somewhere publicly so anyone who's building anything in Contrib will understand the rules to creating this interface. We'll get a much better experience for everyone all the way through. I don't think that's something that Drupal has. If it is something that Drupal has, I haven't seen it, which means it's either not public or not easy to find. So I think that that's something that could really help us out too long term in trying to create a better, more intuitive, more simplistic product. So I'm super looking forward to that, which is great. let's see. So we've got a couple of changes that happened in the last week, which is really great. BW Panda submitted an issue to add a cancel link on a node creation form, which is something that I have wanted for a very long time. So when you're creating a node, it gives you two buttons. It's like preview and save, but what do you want to do if you don't want to save, if you want to throw this thing out? And right now the only solution is hit the back button in your browser, but it's kind of silly. Like, we've trained people, don't hit the back button in your browser, because sometimes that's not what you want to do. You want to give them a way out of that form, and so we've added a cancel link. This is the same kind of experience that you have when you're you get to a confirm form, and the confirm form says, continue or cancel, and there's a cancel link there. So we've copied that same pattern onto the node link, which is amazing, and we've gotten that in. Apparently it took Drupal like 3.5 years, and they still haven't managed to cut that in, and it was something where we're like, oh yeah, we want that commit, and then he was like, oh my god, Backdrop just did it really fast. So yay for having a nice small issue queue where things can get tended to quickly. For now. So I think that that's a huge improvement, and thanks to BW Panda for that change also. So let's see. We've also got a bunch of stuff that we would love to have reviewed before release, and since we're getting close to release, it would be great to have somebody look at, for example, the markup that is generated from layout module. That's brand new, just went in this week. So if we could have somebody eyeball that and make sure we're not doing anything that front enders are really going to disagree with, that would be great. And then also if we could have kind of a CSS review at a really high level, like, are all the CSS files in directories called CSS, and are we using classes instead of IDs as much as possible, and things like that. Would be really great to have someone review that. I created a list of all of the CSS files that need to be reviewed. There are some extra files in core that don't actually need a review. They're just there for tests, so I removed them from that master list of everything that is in CSS. So if anyone wants to work on that, that would be a good place to jump into, especially if you have front-end skills like HTML and CSS. That's something that Drupal is notoriously bad at getting right, and so since we're inheriting that legacy, we'd like to improve that if possible. So it would be great to have a review there. Let's see, peripheral things we're working on. The API website is up and running, which is great. We've got change records. I'm not sure if anyone's done any work on that since last week. Luke, do you know if there are any new change records added to the, I know you can't talk because your computer's doesn't work with Google Hangouts, but if you could add a note in the sidebar, maybe.
I can talk now.
Oh, good, you're back.
and no, there are no change records. I've actually gone through and sort of looked for what I should change. Isn't there? There's a tag that isn't there that?
There is. Let's see. Yeah. So if you, I'm not sure if you can see this agenda. Maybe I can post this in here too. But in the section here for the API website, there's a link of change records that are currently on GitHub. So these are the ones that Nate and I have changed something and then tagged it as needs change notice, usually Nate. Those are the ones that we need to add. And then there's also a list here of change records from Drupal.org. So we just need to take the earliest ones from when Drupal 8 forked until January 29th, 2012, and make sure that we get those included too. And so it might be good to start with the Drupal.org ones because those are more similar to what we actually are going to want on our API site. But if we could get a couple of those moved over, you'll probably start to see how the architecture on the Drupal.org side doesn't exactly match the architecture on the Backdrop site. Like, we aren't going to be able to node reference an issue, right? Because those issues aren't on backdropcms.org. So there are going to be some really subtle differences where it's like maybe we just need a link field. We can link to GitHub or something like that. Yeah, I think if you can just create like 5 of them, it'll become really obvious where the deficiencies are in the architecture, and then we can switch over. Like, if you want to create all of them, that would be amazing. But if you want to switch over and try and create a new one based on what's in GitHub, you can see if there's any differences there as well. And some of those, like, we don't We don't necessarily have final wording, but it would be good to get a placeholder for them on our API site anyway. That's like, we know we're going to need this change record. We don't know what it's going to say. Here's a rough guess at what it is. And then that way we can come back and edit it more easily and say, oh, you know, what I meant to say was this, or let's change the title, or whatever it is we need to get it updated. And at least we'd have a starting place. It's easier to have something review than nothing, obviously. That's why we have nothing.
Right. Okay, so there's 18 issues in the GitHub list that's linked there, and last week I counted that there were like 70 or 80 change records that we figured were in the right range on thing. So should we create 100 change records? Is that the kind of scale we're looking for?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
All right.
And the biggest thing is just making sure, like, if we can get the first 10 done, we'll know that we have the architecture done, and we can hand it off to anyone to create the rest. But because you are intimately aware with how that API site is set up, having you do the first ones and change things when you run into problems would probably be the best use of your time. So you can go ahead and make changes to the fields and stuff if that's needed.
Okay, well, I'll grab some from each pile. I'll grab some from the new Backdrop ones and from the older Drupal ones, and you know, we'll work from there.
That would be great.
All right.
Okay, and then if you're doing a Drupal.org one, you can link to Drupal.org. Like, if there's any history in there that's like, here's how this has changed. Like, obviously, we don't have that history in Backdrop, so you can still link those out to Drupal.org. I think that would be valuable for people who are coming to Backdrop and need that information. So I wouldn't be afraid of like stuff that links offsite.
Okay.
All right, update server. So we don't have any progress on the update server. We need to build a server that will allow your Backdrop site to talk to its mothership and find out if it's up to date or not. We have some great ideas about how we'd like to do things a little bit differently on Backdrop's update server than we're doing on Drupal's. In particular, we'd like to track information about which modules in any given Backdrop site are being used and some of the subsystems as well. So we have some ideas about what we want. We don't have anyone working on it. It would be great if we could get someone to start. If not, it'll have to wait until Backdrop 1 comes out, which is or Backdrop 1.0.0, which is less than ideal, but you know, getting the code done first is more important. And then we also need an official GitHub service. So this is so that people who create modules and themes on GitHub can identify those modules and themes as being specifically for Backdrop. And then Backdrop's website, the flagship site, backdropcms.org, can gather all of that information off of GitHub to build a listing that people can search to find stuff. Again, we're going to need modules and themes before we're going to need this service. But we've got a couple we can use to test if somebody wanted to start working on it right now. And it would be super useful to have that with the redesign of our website, which we also need some help with. So we have anyone who wants to work on an update server, that would be really valuable in addition to our service, official GitHub service. So other things we're working on for our primary website, we want to get a redesign kind of around the same time as our launch that will show, you know, we're not just a software project in development, but we're actually a legit thing. Once we become a legit thing, that would be useful. We want to use our new logo and fonts in our general branding guide once we have that done, which will be really handy. We want to be able to build the service that will allow people to find modules and themes. We also want to have a showcase site, much like Drupal has, which is super successful. And also a directory where people who are doing things with Backdrop can be found. So Drupal also has a way that you can search for service providers in various different areas. I think Backdrop needs the same kind of thing. And then Drupal also recently launched a job site. So if you're someone looking for a job or someone looking to hire, more likely, you can post those listings on the website. I think getting all of these things for Backdrop is going to be super useful. Priorities, though, like we shouldn't post any jobs until we have any jobs. We shouldn't build the job site until we have jobs. So longer priorities, just things we see Drupal doing and going, oh yeah, that's a good idea, we should do that too. We throw in this list. But yeah, for now it's the redesign, getting some branding up there that says we're doing the right thing. Some new words are good, that kind of stuff. So there's lots of stuff to do. We can use help everywhere along the way. If people want to jump in, just let us know. We work virtually together every Thursday, so after this meeting through the rest of the afternoon and evening, we are going to start doing a fortnightly design-specific meeting for Backdrop, so once every 2 weeks. Yeah, and we are trying to figure out whether we should start that tonight or next week. We have someone who's been super good proposing different things that we should be doing for design and want to set up a meeting, but they're in India, which makes the time change super difficult. So I think right now it is 2 in the morning in India. So this is not a good time for that meeting. So we're going to try and do another one that's on a little bit of a shifted schedule so that we can get people from all around the world included. And so we're planning on meeting at 8:30 p.m. tonight, but I don't think they're available tonight. So we're going to try and start next week. So we'll have a meeting in the middle of the day. This one is kind of lunchtime for those of us in California. We're going to try and do another one just after dinner time. It'll work for breakfast for people in India. So hopefully that'll work out. And we can kind of include some people for in more parts of the world than just here in the US. So hopefully that'll be the right time. We'll follow up on Twitter or wherever we can with an actual time once that gets settled. But yay, designers. We don't have any of them. They're amazing. I'm super excited. Other stuff, we're going to meet in real life at Bad Camp on Sunday, November 9th. We're going to have an in-person sprint. We're going to steal a round table, or maybe more than one, depending on how many people show up, in the mezzanine level, which is where all of the sprinting happens at Bad Camp. So they're going to be having a core developer summit nearby. We're going to steal one of the tables there in the coder area for backdrop sprinting. So hopefully we can all work together to make everything better in the same place and all get along, which will be great. And other stuff that's coming up, we also are going to be giving a talk not only at Bad Camp, session schedule was posted earlier this week, but also at SymphonyCon in Madrid. We've been asked to do a keynote talk on open source communities. And so that'll be super interesting to talk to a community that's not Drupal about the Drupal community and the Backdrop community, and hopefully see what their growing open source community is running into as well. So I think that'll be super fun. And then other stuff coming up next year, we don't have anything for firm on the calendar, but we are looking into places where people are interested in hearing about Backdrop. So if anyone is organizing a camp and wants to hear from us, let us know. We're definitely interested in coming and talking, but we don't often insert ourselves into places unless we're sure we're wanted there. So if you want us there, let us know. If you don't want us there, don't let us know, and we probably won't show up. So that is it, I guess, for today's agenda. But I did want to open up and see if anyone had anything else to add, or any questions, or anything that we should add to this weekly agenda.
I got nothing.
Got nothing. I feel like so much amazing stuff has happened. I do want to add, just because I'm super excited about it, we are currently working on setting up a way to get the demo button on our website working so that it will fire up a Backdrop site on Pantheon. And we've had, Kevin did an excellent job of testing the current process to figure out what all of the snags are in it. And we're now working with some folks over at Pantheon to help create a version of Backdrop that will install really smoothly, as well as we have an issue in our queue that will help Backdrop run on any hosting platform that needs to do similar stuff. So we're trying to kind of get something specific so that our demo will work, and then also get something super general so that anyone who's hosting Backdrop can get that problem solved. So I'm super excited about working on that, and I want people to be able to give it a try. So, yay.
Hey, I actually do have one thing.
Yes.
The Backdrop Examples project that I've started is on GitHub.
Nice.
I can put the repository, and if you tell me where I should broadcast that, and I'd be happy if anyone else wanted to jump in and do the same kind of thing. It's super easy. You know, most of the examples just you change the .info file and they work.
Nice.
And then the ones that don't, that's the interesting stuff. So either way, it's to get into.
That's great. Nate, do you think you put that in the Backdrop Contrib group?
Yep, that's exactly what I'm thinking, that we should invite you, Luke, to the Backdrop Contrib group. Right now, there's a group on GitHub, github.com/backdrop-contrib, and the only module that's in there is the devel module, if you need a Backdrop ported devel module. But it would be great to put examples in there as well. I mean, long term, we still have some discussion about like what we're going to use this group for, but examples is going to fit in there no matter what its future looks like. So so I'll invite you, and then maybe you can throw it up into the Backdrop contrib group.
Perfect.
I will set up a team and invite him to the team immediately after this call.
Okay, sounds good.
Yay! All right, well, thank you, Luke. That's amazing. I can't wait to see it. We'll see everyone in IRC. If you have any questions, you can tweet at us. We're at Backdrop CMS. You can join us in IRC. You can find us on Facebook. You can try and find us on Google+, but I wouldn't recommend it. It's really impossible to find anything on Google+. So yeah, Twitter, Facebook, IRC, email, however you can get a hold of us, you go ahead and do it. We're here to answer questions. All right, thanks guys for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Okay, bye guys.